I've been with the Edmonton Police Service now for a little over 17 years, and I've worked in patrol. That's where we always start, get your feet wet, and then I've worked in forensic identification services, which most people won't know what that is, but if you've ever seen the show CSI, that's me without the Hummer and the partner. So I worked in that area and moved on from there, and I'm currently in what's called the Community Crime Management Team. So each area we've got 6 different divisions that we have with Edmonton Police Service, and each of those divisions is broken down into 4 sectors. And then an officer is given a sector, and we go through and we analyze crime trends and things like that, and then see what we can do to try and fight crime in particular areas. So that's what I do, and I will let you know that I'm a replacement for Sergeant Ian Smith, who normally would do this presentation, and I will be quite upfront and honest. Ian has more, Sergeant Smith, Ian has more experience with this, and he's authorized me to say so, and it's because he has an autistic son, so he's got more information on what he's grown up with for the last 15 years of having a son in that situation. And I don't have that experience, so the information you get from me is based on what Ian has provided to me, and then my ignorance. So I apologize if at the end we will have question and answers. I will answer anything to the best of my ability. And if I don't know the answer, I'm really, I used to joke around and say, I tell you, I would be happy to give you a made-up answer, but I don't. What I will do, though, is I will get your name and number, and I'll get a hold of Sergeant Smith, or if it's for some other area, and I'll get you an answer. Because I don't like giving out an answer immediately. That's wrong, because that's not fair to you guys. So if you do have questions and I can't answer them, I'll be honest and let you know I don't know that answer, but I'll find out. So we'll have a question and answer period at the end of it. I'm going to go over what EPS has and what your expectations can be from us. We break it down in a couple different areas there, and I forgot to grab the clicker, so I'm just going to use this, I think. So from patrol members, ultimately what we're looking at here is your patrol members are the boots on the street. So that's just the first line of response for people, for officers. When you call, we're normally the first ones that will respond to any area. And we do have the authority to apprehend under the Mental Health Act. So if there's a concern for safety and security of the person or of you, we can apprehend somebody under that Mental Health Act and then work from there. We generally, the patrol responds when all other measures have failed from your perspective. So it's important to understand that we're a crisis response. Like we're not a long-term solution. You wouldn't call our patrol members to come out there and give you advice on building support networks and things like that. And many of you probably, of course, I don't know what range you're at, whether you're at the 15 years you've been dealing with this, or you've got a young one, so you're just getting into it. But many of you may already have that support network you've built around, which is important. But you need to understand that from a police perspective, we're a crisis response. So we respond when you've called us because things have clearly gone wrong, or your assistant is called, someone who's the assistant to your person. So the caregiver itself. So we aren't long-term, we are really just crisis response for that. Now, that's from your patrol people. We do have, the next slide here, something that some of you may already know about, but it's our PAC, which is our Police and Crisis Team. And that's a partnership between adult crisis response teams and the EPS. So that is a police officer paired up with somebody that's from a crisis team that's got access to a lot different folders like medical records, etc. The police don't have access to. A lot of people think, oh, we're Big Brother and we have access to everything, and I'll be honest with you, we have probably the least amount of access you'd be surprised at how little information we have. If someone hasn't dealt with the police, we don't have access to that information. So the crisis team has a bit more access to stuff. But what our PAC people are responding to is people with mental health crisis. That's what they respond to. And as a general rule, they are the secondary response unit. So the first people on scene, we back that patrol person we dealt with, who doesn't have any specialized training. We're a generalist. The patrol people are trained in their block 1, 2, and 3 to respond to everything out there. So they don't have crisis training unless you're fortunate enough to get somebody that's changed career paths, right? They used to be in the crisis intervention, or they were a psychologist and they thought, I want to make a lot less money. And they've gone on to do a different job. So you may get that. I joined later in life, and I have a whole nother life that I had before I became a police officer, and I frequently tap into that. But you can't count on that. So you might get Sergeant Smith responding to your call, and he's got life experience dealing with that, with an autistic son. I don't have that luxury or that experience, so if I respond, I'm not going to have it. So patrol's a very diverse response, people. PACT is a little bit more focused. But again, they'll usually, when patrol gets there, we'll make that phone call. And that's based on information. I'll talk about that in a moment. Like if we have more information on the call, we may be able to call PACT immediately and say, listen, this is the circumstances of the call. I'm on my way as the crisis response, but I'd like to see PACT showing up as well. So our PACT unit is generally a secondary response unit that comes either after the fact or in conjunction with the patrol members. But we do have a phone number here that's for days and afternoons, 780-342-7777. And that's our crisis response team and for youth crisis as well. So that's a great information for that. And Alberta Health Services, urgent services available 24/7. So those are things that are available, but again, your patrol member isn't that person. You're getting into more of that narrow spectrum of what they do. So I don't respond to general calls out there. I respond to information-led policing as a crime management team person. PACT responds to people that are in a mental health crisis. And again, it's that crisis situation. It's, again, they have more access to information on services than the average patrol person would. But basically, again, the team is going to be providing information for you to help build yourself support and what to do on a more long-term basis of what's going on there. So I want to talk next real quickly about what you can expect when a patrol person comes on there, because that, if you've never had police respond there, and even if you had, it's quite different. What's important to understand, if you call because, or your caregiver calls because something has gone wrong, and generally it's a physical confrontation that we're dealing with. People don't call because they're getting depressed, and they're calmed down, they're sitting in the corner and not saying anything, because at that point you can work with people and there's no urgency in that. When police get called, it's because of a crisis situation. So it's important that you understand that you expect police to restore order quickly. That's what we're called there to do, and when we get there, again, it's based on the information we are provided. But if somebody's violent, and that's your family member, whether it be a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, a mom and dad, it can be anything, we're called because there's usually a physical confrontation has gone sideways, and you don't have control of the situation, so you've called for help. So when police arrive, we're there to restore order quickly. Now, so what does that involve? And that's where it gets a little bit dicey. Like Sergeant Smith said, and I was very impressed with his open honesty about it. He said, you know what? I hope my son never gets tasered or never gets handcuffed. He says, and if it happens, I'll be pretty upset. But I'll understand the circumstances based on his history. And so it's important to understand that if somebody's using violence, and the worst feeling for me, because I've dealt with these circumstances and I don't have a lot of training in the mental health field. That wasn't my life experience beforehand. And so we go in there, and I'll tell you, no matter what call I go to, whether it's a mental health call or a violent robbery or something else, my first response is not one of observed violence to the situation. I respond, my first reaction is to try and come to a conclusion calmly, respectfully, and without a use of violence. Now, those decisions are made just like that. So as I walk in, I may not have that opportunity. If your loved one has a knife in his hand, and you know that he has no intentions of harming anybody, but that information hasn't been passed on to us, or he's coming towards you with a knife, my responsibility is your safety. Your love is to protect your loved one, and is not going to be happy about seeing a police officer remove that knife and handcuff your loved one to ensure your safety, his or her safety, as well as my safety. But you need to expect that when police respond, that may be what happens. We're not there to dish out, contrary to some some newspapers maybe. We're not there to dish out punishment because we think it's fun. We're not there to utilize violence to get to our ends. What we're there for to do is to utilize as much force as is reasonably necessary to ensure safety amongst the people. So, but it's important that you might see a use of force. You may see somebody taken to the ground, because when they're at a lower elevation, if they're low to the ground, and you're higher or I'm higher, I have more control in that circumstance to try and stop the violence from occurring. So we're not throwing them to the ground with reckless abandon. We will try and take them down as best we can with control, so that we can get them to a point where we can control them, so that we can start talking to them and calm them down. We don't like the use of violence. It's our last resort, but it is a resort that we may have to come to in order to restore that order. So that's important for you to understand. And the other thing to remember is that when we respond, we're responding with as much detail as you or your caregiver can provide. So the more details that you can provide to us, even to the evaluator, so they know what they're dealing with as they come in there. Because just so you know, our evaluator gets the information, it gets sent over onto a computer screen, comes into our car. So on our way there, we're totally distracted driving. No, we're not. But we're trained in it. We're trying to gather as much information as possible so we can go in there. But if all we get is Johnny has got a knife, and he's handicapped, and he's threatening me and I can't control him anymore, understand, all the information we have is Johnny's violent with a knife, and you've called us for help because you're afraid for your life. We don't know whether he's high functioning or low functioning because you haven't provided that. So it's really important that we get a brief history. We're coming as quick as we can, so we may not be able to read all of it, but that's important information for us to know. Medications that he's on and whether he or she's taking them. Because most often we find that's a lot of times where the circumstances elevated was because they're off their medication. Autism is different as a general rule from my understanding because it's not medication controlled. It's about triggers, etc. But you need to know that we're going based on the information we have. If we need to apprehend under the Mental Health Act, expect that you will come to the hospital with us. We've had the odd person say, whoa, you're just taking them, and I'll deal with them later. Right now I've got things to deal with. But remember that we generally need you because you're the information or the caregiver that you've left your son, daughter, family member, loved one in care of. They're going to need to come with us so that they can provide us with information, and not just us, but the people at the hospital as to what happened in that particular situation, so they can work with that information as well. When the police are there and we've got them and we're calming them down, as a general rule, there will be more than one officer there. So one officer will have dealt with your loved one and will be hands-on with that person. Another officer will be there asking either you or the caregiver for information on background. It's important to explain anything else that you can think of that might be helpful to us to utilize, so it's not a violent confrontation. And okay, what are his things that calm this person? What are these things that that we need to know? Because you're the expert on that family member. We didn't grow up with him or her. We don't know. We've had exactly 12 seconds worth of interaction with them. You know what I mean? So it's important that you know that and what the police have. And we don't have necessarily a history of growing up and dealing with this sort of thing. So that's what you can expect if you call the police. Next, I'm going to talk just a little bit about prevention. And what's important there is, and this sounds really silly, but it's really important to hire competent caregivers and educate them on proper advocacy. And by that, I even just mean that they can articulate to a police officer what is going on. So it's important that you when you are dealing with that caregiver, that they are able to communicate to the police all of the circumstances surrounding your loved one, because that's going to be our information giver. And so if you hire someone that hasn't got the proper training, hasn't got the proper education on your loved one, you're kind of leaving your loved one hanging a little bit, you're leaving you hanging a little bit, and you're leaving the police and any other support team that's going to be coming with us hanging because we don't have that information. So it is really important that if you're replacing caregivers that you remember, and this is one that I'm guilty of sometimes, is I've instructed somebody and I've taught somebody and I know exactly what's going on, and then someone else new comes in here and my instructions to the second person aren't necessarily as complete and in-depth as it was to the first person, because I'm so used to that caregiver that I had before and being very competent, that I skip things because I think, oh, that's common sense. But it's not common if they don't know about it. So that's one thing we ask from a prevention perspective, is to make sure you've got someone there that has been properly updated on all the circumstances, and they can pass that on to us if we have to deal with them. There's also some physical measures in place. I'm not sure, many of you probably already know about this, but things like the locks, having locks on your home to keep them within and keep where they can go to and access to different things. So obviously, if concern is going to be in your dangerous areas like your medicine cabinets, weapons like knives, and a lot of people don't think much about that, but I know from domestic violence, most arguments are at the kitchen table, and what's in the kitchen? The knife block. So that's a big concern whenever I go to domestic violence. In my mindset, I'm thinking, okay, if it's in the kitchen, what am I looking for? And it's the same thing. If somebody's calling me and it's happening in the kitchen, I've got to be aware, are there knives? So from a prevention perspective, if you can keep them away, that's great. There are GPS watches, so if your loved one goes missing, police need to know where that is. One thing I do want to make sure you understand, though, is like a lot of people say, well, he's got an iPhone and I have my Find My Phone app, and they can ping people. It's really important that you understand that police have a very limited access of information to the phone. So you can look on your computer and see that your phone is 1.5 meters away from you, because that's where you put it down. Police, in order to get that same information, they contact the provider. All the provider will do is ping the last location. They will not give you any more information than that. So they will say, yeah, and that could be within a 5-kilometer radius or 1-kilometer radius, depending on where it is. So we can't locate your loved one based on his phone. So in that case, if you've got the Find My Phone app, you might want to have a laptop handy that you can log on and say, okay, this is where it is. Now, some people say, if I knew where he was, I wouldn't be calling you, and that's a good point. That's a very good point. But just so you know, there are such things as GPS watches which would help you locate them before you even call us. Or call us and say, but I am tracking him and I'm anticipate going to get him. This is where it is on the GPS watch. Or like I say, if you've got an Apple iPhone, you can do that Find My Phone app. It's a free one and it tracks it, but you need to have a computer so that you can be able to drive around as a passenger, no distracted driving, and find out where they are, right? And there's also alarms, and it's funny because some people don't think about these, but you can alarm your home so that all your interior alarms are off, but the exterior exits. So if someone gets up and leaves, that alarm goes off and scares the heck out of you, wakes you up really fast, but you've only got a 1-minute delay of finding where your loved one went to versus that. So just a couple things to keep in mind that we look for from a prevention perspective. That are very for you, that if you don't know about it, everyone's, my favorite is, what's common sense? But if you haven't ever thought about it or been told about it, it's not common. There's also something we call the location of interest, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% up on the LOIs for this type of thing, so I don't know what our, an LOI, what that means is it on our computer system when we're dispatched to an address, if there's an LOI flag to it, what that means, it gives us this location of interest because this. He's a police hater and he's shot at police before. That's important information for me to know. It has an alarm system and it links to this. Sergeant Smith has got in here, said to consider an LOA flagging with police, and I don't know personally how that works, but it's something to look into to see if it's something you want to know, that if you can flag it. So if we're going there or if we're in the area, we know that this location of interest and your loved one is prone to walk to just walking away sort of idea, or he's violent, but the color purple calms him immediately. That's kind of neat information because, though I'm not allowed to wear a purple uniform, so if that's something I can maybe try and think through, like, okay, well, what can we do? We know purple. Can I talk about purple? Maybe that will get us interested. That starts that information passing back and forth with them, and maybe builds a bridge immediately upon getting there. Does that make sense? So the LOI can possibly put information in there that we can utilize on our way there. Again, I'm not certain of how to go about that, so I'll be honest with that. You probably have to either contact Sergeant Smith or even just go online to the Edmonton Police Service website, and I'm sure there's something in there that you could probably contact somehow and ask. Our corporate communications people respond to all questions that are asked, and like I say, they don't know all the answers, but because I used to be I didn't mention I was in traffic, but I might have been a divisional traffic guy, and I constantly get my phone ringing with traffic questions because people call in, well, what about this and what about that? And our corporate comms people will frequently call me up because I'll answer it and she knows I won't make stuff up. So if you need to get a hold of them, try them, and they might be able to explain the location of interest flagging and things like that. So that's pretty much the presentation I have from an EPS perspective. I will tell you this, when looking into our policies of dealing with these circumstances, I didn't find a lot. And a lot of it, I think, comes down to because the vulnerable persons, we deal with PACT, and we've gone, in that sense, we've got, it's a nice feed for PACT, but it is something that I'd like to take a look at more of, and probably Sergeant Smith will be looking at more of with regards to our policy. So it's a great learning experience for us for me to be here tonight, because I can hopefully step off from here and see, okay, well, what more can we do to try and help us keep in touch with vulnerable persons? So Gateway might be finding a few phone calls coming their way to ask us how can we benefit ourselves, because ultimately any policy that benefits us benefits you and benefits your loved ones. So that's all I have for here. I want to go to a question and answer period, but I want to double check with you guys, see if you want question and answer period to be let the RCMP continue to do their presentation and do a global question and answer period, or would you prefer it to be now? Because I don't want to be making turn off and on.
We might just do a global, just in the interest of privacy.
Sure.
So we'll have all the presentations, and then Yonique will step out.
Okay, that sounds good. So we'll send them up next.
But
so,
you're not leaving, right?
But I'm not leaving. I will leave here.
I have a question.
Because I'm hoping to learn from these guys.
Yeah. And if you don't mind being online, you're totally welcome to ask your question.
Well, the question is just very general. So if the crisis is in the evening,
Yes.
so not days or afternoons,
Yep.
do you call the 911 or the 423, 456?
911.
The 911.
My understanding is you would call 911, and the other numbers for the daytime usage.
Okay.
So if it's after hours, yeah,
Right.
call 911, and then we'll get in touch with PACT unit, because I believe PACT is on other hours, but you just wouldn't get through to them.
Right,
That's all.
okay, that's all I need. Thanks.
All right.
If there's anyone else who has questions who doesn't mind to be broadcast internationally, please do feel free.
Sure.
So my son is 6 foot,
Woohoo.
wears a hoodie.
Yep.
He'll be 6'3" by the time he's done, but wears the hoodie
Yep.
and kind of lurks in stores. Now, to me, my concern is he could appear a
Absolutely.
questionable character.
Absolutely.
So what could I do? He has bipolar and autism, so he might not identify to anybody coming up to him in a typical manner.
Absolutely.
So flags would be raised, perhaps you guys might be called.
Absolutely.
What would help you guys approach him in a manner that's not
Hostile and aggressive.
sort of, yes?
Yes, and that's, you know what, that's a good question, because there's not a flag you can put on the system that way, because it's not like he's got a medical alert bracelet that we can read as we're coming up there, or that anybody's calling in, like the store manager,
Yeah.
like, okay, this guy's scaring me because he's big and he's
Mhm.
lurking, and I'm not sure what he's doing,
Right.
but I'm in here alone and I'm calling police for a suspicious person, and police are gonna show up. And like you say, you know, we don't profile. That's international, right? We don't profile, but we do read situations, and I'll tell you, you're right. If we've got a 6'3" guy that's a skookum guy, he's wearing the hoodie, and he's not responding to our questions in an appropriate manner,
Or timely manner,
or
right?
timely
That's
manner, because it's
another
going to
one.
take him time to process that question.
Exactly.
Absolutely. It's going to set us off a little. We're going to be like, okay, what's going on here? Now, again, every police officer, I can't say how every police officer is going to respond to that, because some go in there a little bit slower than others. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. My first reaction, if I don't get a response, is to question why I'm not getting a response. I'm not going to run in there with my hands up, and I'd like to think most of our officers won't, unless he's being violent. We don't respond with violence. We're not going to run in there and like, oh, this guy's got a hoodie on, time to take the gloves off and lay a whooping, right? That's not how we respond. So I don't know that there's anything you could do to help with your son and how he portrays himself that way. What I'd like to believe is that we're not going to run in there and start fist a flail, and we're going to come in there. And that, I'll be honest with you, that also comes down to, without undue respect to our junior members, because our junior members are out there and they're gung-ho and they're out there to help. I don't know too many people, I don't know anybody. Like, when I joined the police service, I joined to help people. I don't like bullies, and I want to be there to try and help stop bullying, right? And so, and I'm in there to help people. And I'd like to think that the police officers that we hire that go through our process, they're there for that same reason. So they're not in there to try and, they're in there to help the person that calls in, but if it's just a suspicious person and we talk to them, hopefully they'll take that time to figure out what's going on. And when things aren't going the way they expect, they'll use their officer safety to ensure safety of everybody, including them. But I don't know that there's really anything you can do, because an LOI goes to an address, but not to a person. And if someone calls in and says, yeah, we've got a 6'3" guy that's big and he's scaring the heck out of me. He's got his hoodie pulled up and it's nighttime. Can you please come and protect me? Nothing's going to show up there saying, oh, hey, that's Johnny, and we know he's autistic and schizophrenic. There's nothing you can do for that. So my answer to that is, unfortunately, I don't know that there's anything you can possibly
Do you guys look for medical alerts?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So it's funny because we had an impaired driver called in, and we had 2 people responding. And this is not because I'm the smartest, the sharpest tool in the box, and I'm not saying that, but it was funny, when I got there, I saw something shiny, and I looked, and I saw his medical alert straight. Sure enough, he's diabetic, and he's off, and his sugar levels crashed. But when we're dealing with somebody, the first thing isn't necessary. It's the medical alert basement. It's funny because when we got sugar into him, he come back, he says, "Does nobody read this thing? I spent $150 on it." But I don't think they're medical alerts. And the next question is, I have to get close enough to that person to read that medical alert bracelet. So,
But you'd see it if you wound up handcuffing him.
Absolutely.
You'd see it, and would you then look at it? Maybe?
Well, I'd like to say yes. I can't guarantee everybody will look at it, but absolutely. And once you've handcuffed them, and when you're putting the handcuffs on and the bracelet's right there, and it's a medical alert, hopefully one would take a look and flip it over and then say, "Oh, autistic." Ding.
I'm just looking for that light bulb moment that gives everyone maybe just that little bit more flex.
I'll be honest with you, I don't think it would hurt to have it. So if they can have that on there, and it's not gonna, and they're not gonna be taking it off because it's not something they're used to. Yeah, the medical alert basement with something on there is definitely a step in the right direction for helping. Will it work every time? No. I'll tell you right now, nothing's guaranteed in life except for death and taxes, and they're working on death. But the medical alert basement is could be a step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, my son loves police, and probably half of them they know him. But he tends to run towards them because he likes them so much. So, and sometimes it could be dangerous, and it's like he's big, like he said, and doesn't look like he has a disability. So, and sometimes like the police sits in the car, and he goes and knock at the door. And the other night, the police said, "Is there any problem?" "No, I just want to say I have a nice day." You know, I think so. He really loves and police. Like he wanted to come tonight, but I thought he'd be asking. He wouldn't leave you alone. So
fair enough. And you know what? I'm not going to lie to you. We like people that like us. There's a couple in Edmonton that don't. But absolutely. But I'll tell you, if I'm off on a street and some larger guy comes running up towards me, of course our first reaction is going to be stepping back a little bit and getting a little distance on there, until we see the reaction, right? And that's what my hope is, that most police officers will wait for that reaction.
most of the time he's with the staff, but then the staff will be way behind
because he runs faster than they do, because he's taller. So when you're hiring caregivers, make sure you hire people that used to be on the Canadian Olympic running team, so they can keep up.
Well, it just
absolutely.
And what I would like to share with you guys, we had a bit of an experience with medication. And he had about 3 or 4 times that he just lost control, and he would smash the chairs or a coffee table or anything. And we called 911, and the police and the paramedics that they came, I think they hold medals. They were wonderful, really.
Can you get that on the international? I'm
I
glad to
wanted
hear
to
that.
send a letter or something before,
Yeah.
but I didn't know where to do it, what to send it. I mean, when they came in, they would calm him down so quick, and they start to talk, and then they start to talk about he wanting out the girlfriend, and he talked about that, and he was all calm before. By the time the paramedic came, there was no need for them. And one police said, first he looked her in his eye, and he wanted to talk to me in private, and he said, "Is your son on street drugs?" And I said, "No, this is the medication he's taking." So they kind of realized it was a very powerful medication. They gave him Ativan to calm him down, and the paramedic said, and I said, "Well, what about the interaction?" They said, "No, we'll wait here." And they waited an hour just to see that there was no interaction. So I really good comment about that, and
Fantastic.
all the 4 times. And the last one, he said, we could take him in to scare him, But then he's gonna spend the night in jail, he's gonna have a record for what? He said he's calm now, he's fine, so
Absolutely.
you guys
Absolutely.
really
Well,
doing a
you
good
know what,
job out
I'm
there. I
very
share
glad to
that
hear
with
that. Actually,
everybody
thank you for
because,
sharing that.
You know,
Yeah.
probably you guys always hear the negative, you know.
Occasionally. But that's nice to hear, because you know what, that's what I'd like to think will happen,
Yeah, come on.
is most of our police officers respond like that.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, that's good to hear, thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, I thought you wanted to.
You had one of the earlier slides, you talked about us being prepared to go to the hospital.
Yes.
What hospital might our children be sent to?
So that is, it's funny, because there's, that is completely determined by the EMS dispatch people, and it's based on call volume and things like that, because we had one where we were on our way to the RA, which was great, because they've got, my understanding anyways, they've got an amazing psychiatric unit, right, for dealing with this sort of mental crisis. And on their way, they got diverted and went off to another hospital, and I think it might have been the Miz, actually. I think we diverted and ended up coming back to the West End. And not that they're not probably a great facility as well, but what happened is the RA had reached its capacity and they weren't allowing anybody else to come in. So it's funny, because that's, general rule, we want you to come with them at the time, because worst case scenario is we say we're going to the RA and we're halfway there and we get diverted. And all of a sudden, you're 3 blocks behind because you want to grab a jacket and all that stuff to go with them, and all of a sudden you show up at the RA and your son's not there. And you're like, how did that? Now, they should be able to locate them,
Yeah.
but yeah. So there isn't a specific place. I do know that the RAs, apparently whenever they have mental crisis, that's their preferred spot is there. And I believe U of A is number 2. But they go where they're allowed to go to.
So does Alberta Hospital on that list?
I don't know that they are actually. Now, this could be old information, because it's been a while since I've done that. But my understanding is Alberta Hospital's taken off the list for a while, because they didn't have an emergency intake. You had to be referred there.
Right.
So they would go maybe to RA, and then RA would say, listen, they need to go off to Alberta Hospital. But if that has changed, I apologize for not giving you the information. But the last I'd heard was Alberta Hospital's off that list of taking people there.
Yeah.
It was just the local hospitals first,
Yeah.
and then they could be diverted from there to Alberta Hospital. Usually that was until the next day or so.
Okay, good for enough.
Yeah. All right.